The night my mother locked the front door and stood in front of it with her arms crossed, my two children were asleep upstairs on a deflating air mattress. "Pay me $6,000, she said, "or you're not leaving this house." I looked past her at the deadbolt. Then I looked at the woman who used to pack my school lunches and braid my hair before church every Sunday. And that was the moment I realized something terrifying. My mother had never brought me home to help me. She brought me home because she was drowning in debt, and my children and I had become her survival plan. What she didn't know was that 24 hours later, at our Mother's Day brunch, I was going to place a manila envelope on the table in front of my grandmother, my aunt, my sister, and everyone else in the family. Inside that envelope were mortgage records, debt notices, handwritten budgets, and proof that every story my mother told about saving me was a lie. By the end of brunch, nobody at that table would ever look at her the same way again. My name is Clara Bennett. I was 33 years old, a licensed financial auditor, and my two children were sleeping on a collapsing air mattress in the same bedroom where I used to hang glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling as a kid. 3 months earlier, I had stood outside the county courthouse in heels I could barely walk in anymore, clutching divorce papers in one hand and my son's backpack in the other. Mascara stained my blouse collar. My ex-husband had emptied our savings, destroyed my credit, and disappeared with half the furniture before the ink on the custody agreement was even dry. So I called the one person every daughter believes she can still trust when her life burns down. My mother. "Mom, I need help." She answered before I could even finish crying. "Come home, sweetheart. Family takes care of family." At the time, those words sounded like rescue. I didn't realize they were the opening lines of a business transaction. Because what my mother did over the next 4 months, the rent she secretly charged me, the lies she told behind my back, the rules she imposed on my children, and the moment she physically blocked the front door demanding money, I could have survived all of that. But what I found inside her filing cabinet on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in April changed everything. And what happened during Mother's Day brunch with my grandmother sitting 3 feet away holding a coffee cup while my aunt silently watched the entire family implode, that was the part none of them saw coming. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. If you're new here, we share emotional true-life family stories about betrayal, resilience, survival, and quiet justice. Comment below where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe. Now let's begin. My ex-husband Ethan and I had been married for 10 years. When we met, he was charming in the way unstable men often are. Big dreams, big promises, big apologies. By the end of our marriage, I had learned that charisma and responsibility are not the same thing. The divorce itself wasn't shocking. The financial damage was. While I was raising our kids and working overtime during tax season, Ethan had secretly opened multiple credit cards under my name. By the time I discovered them, there was over $34,000 in debt attached to my Social Security number. Collections notices arrived before the divorce papers did. When the court finalized everything, my credit score had fallen to 417. I had 2 children, a stable career, and a number beside my name that made landlords look at me like I was contagious. My daughter Ava was 8. My son Noah was 5. They had spent their entire lives in a 2-story suburban house with a trampoline in the backyard and bedtime routines that never changed. Then suddenly they were sitting in the back seat of my Honda, surrounded by garbage bags full of clothes, because I couldn't even afford proper moving boxes. I applied for apartments immediately. Rejected. Rejected again. Rejected without callbacks. Every credit check felt like another door slamming in my face. That was when my mother, Lorraine Bennett, offered me temporary help. She lived in the same 4-bedroom colonial house where I grew up. My father had paid it off years before he died from a heart attack. At least that's what everyone believed. When I pulled into her driveway with Ava asleep against the window and Noah clutching his stuffed dinosaur, my mother stood on the porch with tears in her eyes. She hugged me tightly, carried bags inside, made grilled cheese sandwiches for the kids at nearly 10 p.m. And when she opened the door to my old bedroom, there was already an inflated air mattress waiting on the floor. Like she had planned for this. That should have unsettled me. Instead, I cried and begged her. That was mistake number one. The first 2 weeks felt peaceful in the way ceasefires feel peaceful. Quiet, tense, temporary. My mother cooked dinner every evening. Pot roast, lasagna, chicken casserole. We all sat together at the dining room table. Me, my kids, my younger sister Brooke, and her boyfriend Ryan. Brooke was 29. She worked part-time at a boutique salon. Ryan worked construction. They had been living in the master bedroom for nearly 2 years after temporarily moving in when Ryan's lease ended. Temporary apparently meant different things depending on which daughter my mother liked more. Brooke barely acknowledged my children. She stepped around Noah in the hallway like he was furniture. She never asked Ava how she was adjusting to her new school. Ryan disappeared whenever I entered the kitchen. The hostility wasn't loud. It was colder than that. One night, Ava pressed her hand into the air mattress and watched it sink. "Mommy, why does the bed keep going flat?" I forced a smile. "It's like indoor camping." She stared at me with the devastating honesty only children possess. That's not true. By the third week, my mother placed a handwritten paper beside my coffee cup at breakfast. Room and board. $1,500 per month. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. "You said we could stay until I got back on my feet," I whispered. "And adults contribute," my mother replied calmly while stirring sugar into her coffee. I looked toward Brooke. "Does she pay rent?" My mother took a slow sip. "That's between me and your sister." Brooke didn't even look up from her phone. I did the math automatically, because numbers are how I survive panic. $1,500 a month was the average price for an actual 2-bedroom apartment in our area. My mother was charging me market rent for a single room with a collapsing air mattress in a fully paid off house. At least, I thought it was fully paid off. I'll pay her anyway, because desperation makes people tolerate things that would normally humiliate them. Every night the mattress slowly deflated beneath us. Not instantly. Gradually, like the house itself was exhaling us onto the hardwood floor. By 3 a.m. my hip bones pressed directly against the wood. Noah slept through it. Ava never did. She just stared at the ceiling quietly. I bought my own mattress pump after Ryan refused to let me borrow his. Every night I knelt beside the mattress pumping air back into it while my children slept beside me. That rhythmic wheezing sound became the soundtrack of my humiliation. So I started documenting everything. Professional habit. I kept spreadsheets, columns, dates, payments, rules, restrictions, expenses, what I paid versus what I received. The numbers never balanced. Then came the kitchen timer. I wish I were exaggerating. One Monday morning my mother announced new household boundaries. Kitchen access from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. only. Exactly 1 hour. Because Brooke needed the kitchen space. Brooke cooked breakfast at 9 a.m. every morning. The kitchen sat empty most of the day. Still, every evening my mother placed a timer on the counter and twisted the dial. Tick, tick, tick. 45 minutes to cook dinner for my children. 45 minutes to wash dishes. 45 minutes to exist. One night Noah asked for seconds during dinner. My mother looked at the timer. "You eat in your room now." Not to me. To my 5-year-old son. I felt something inside me crack. But I still stayed. Because leaving requires options. And I had none. Then Ava's teacher called. "Mrs. Bennett?" Ava mentioned she sleeps on the floor at her grandmother's house. She said the bed sinks every night. I sat frozen in my car, holding the steering wheel so tightly my fingers hurt. 7-year-olds don't know how to hide family shame. They just tell the truth. That night, I opened my laptop, and for the first time, I stopped thinking like a daughter. I started thinking like an auditor. I calculated every estimated expense for the house. Property taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance, no mortgage. My father had paid it off before he died. So where exactly was my $1,500 going? That question haunted me until the night I found the envelope. White bank envelope, urgent, stamped in red. My mother snatched it off the counter before I could fully read the lender name. Her reaction bothered me more than the envelope itself. So later that week, after everyone fell asleep, I searched the county property records online. The original mortgage satisfaction appeared exactly where it should. Filed in 2019. Paid in full. Then I saw another line beneath it. Second deed of trust. Filed March 2023. I stared at the screen. Amount: $64,000. Monthly payment: $873. My mother had secretly taken out a second mortgage on the house my father spent decades paying off. I drove to the county office the next morning and requested paper copies. Then everything unraveled. The second mortgage, 3 months of missed payments, final notices from the bank, and buried beneath all of it, letters from a wellness MLM company called Everglow Essentials. My mother had sunk tens of thousands into a fake business opportunity after my father died. Inventory, recruitment fees, supplements. When the company collapsed, she refinanced the house to survive, and then she used me to keep herself afloat. But the worst part wasn't the debt. It was the yellow legal pad I found in her filing cabinet. Her handwriting, neat, careful, cold. Clara rent, $1,500. Below it, mortgage, $873. Everglow payment plan, $627. My rent had been divided down to the dollar between her debts. I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was her repayment strategy. I photographed everything, every notice, every statement, every budget sheet. Then I built my own case. Property records, mortgage filings, state tenant laws, unlawful restraint statutes, everything. I wasn't preparing for a fight anymore. I was preparing for an audience. Mother's Day brunch. That became my deadline. Because my grandmother Eleanor would be there, and my Aunt Denise. 2 women my mother could manipulate separately, but not together. Meanwhile, my credit slowly improved as fraud investigations removed Ethan's fake accounts. 417 became 552. Then 581. Finally, I qualified for a tiny 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. The landlord was a woman in her 60s, named Mrs. Alvarez. She studied my paperwork quietly. Then she looked at me and said, "You're exhausted." I almost cried, not because she insulted me, because she noticed. I signed the lease that afternoon. Move-in date, May 10th. Mother's Day brunch, May 11th. Perfect timing. The day before I planned to leave, my mother discovered I was packing. She stood in front of the deadbolted front door with her arms crossed. "You're not leaving until you pay me the $6,000 you owe." I looked at her, at the locked door, at the woman who once braided my hair before school. "You can't keep me here. Watch me." For 1 second I considered calling the police. But I wouldn't let my children come home to flashing lights outside their grandmother's house. So instead I said something else. "Fine. I'll pay." She stepped aside immediately, because she believed fear meant surrender. That was her final mistake. The next morning was Mother's Day. White roses sat in the center of the dining table, ham in the oven, cinnamon rolls cooling beside the sink. My mother smiled like a woman preparing for applause. Grandma Eleanor arrived first, then Aunt Denise. Everyone ate, everyone laughed. Then my mother stood dramatically at the head of the table. "This year has been difficult," she began softly. "But when Clara needed help, I opened my home without hesitation, because family takes care of family." I watched Brooke lower her eyes. Ryan smirked into his coffee. Then my mother delivered the final performance. "Some people take and still try to leave without saying thank you." Silence. Everyone looked at me. Exactly as she intended. So I reached beneath my chair and placed the manila envelope on the table. "Can I say something too?" My mother smiled confidently. "Of course, sweetheart." I opened the envelope. And then I destroyed the story she had spent 4 months building. "I've been paying Mom $1,500 every month to sleep on a deflating air mattress with my children." Grandma Eleanor blinked hard. "What?" I slid the payment records across the table. I showed them the mortgage filings, the overdue notices, the NLN debt, the handwritten budget. I read the numbers aloud calmly. No yelling, no theatrics, just facts. The room transformed. Confusion first, then disbelief, then horror. Grandma Eleanor read every page in silence. Aunt Denise stood behind her shoulder reading too. Brooke started crying before anyone even spoke. Ryan tried defending my mother until Aunt Denise snapped, "Sit down." He sat immediately. Then my grandmother looked at my mother and asked the question that shattered everything. "You charged your daughter rent to pay off a secret mortgage?" My mother finally broke. Not emotionally, strategically. "I was drowning," she whispered. For one brief second I pitied her. Then she pointed at me. "If you hadn't gotten divorced, none of this would have happened." There it was. The truth. Not the financial truth. The emotional truth. She needed someone to blame more than she needed someone to love. Grandma Eleanor stood slowly from the table. She was nearly 80 years old, and suddenly everyone in that room looked terrified of her. "You will never charge Clara another cent," she said quietly. Then she turned toward Brooke and Ryan. "And you two will start paying rent immediately." Nobody argued. Nobody moved. Then my grandmother picked up the kitchen timer sitting on the counter. She looked at it for a long moment and dropped it directly into the junk drawer. "You don't put a timer on children eating dinner," she said. I went upstairs, packed the last box, picked up Noah's stuffed dinosaur, and looked at that half-deflated mattress one final time. "Mommy," Ava whispered from the doorway, "does the new house have real beds?" "Yes," I said. "It does. And for the first time in 4 months,